The gun epidemic in America reared its ugly head again this week when a man shot at least 10 people on a crowded New York City subway station. Riders were simply trying to go to work, run errands, live their lives. Thankfully, no one was killed, and the suspect is now in custody. But this is just the latest in a string of mass shootings across the country. According to the Gun Violence Archive, a nonprofit research group, there have been 21 mass shootings just this month, and 133 this year. 133 this year alone. We're only 104 days into 2022, which is an average of more than one mass shooting a day. We're the only developed country that's like this. Just take a look at this chart from the Pew Research Center of the United States gun death rate per 100,000 people. It's close to 4 times as many as France and more than 10 times in Australia. This Brooklyn shooting comes as violent crimes in the United States have been on the rise since the summer of 2020. With gun violence becoming a growing issue in America, Republicans have clearly framed what they think is the problem here. But bizarrely, it's not the guns.
America's most beautiful cities are indeed being ruined by liberal policies. There's a direct line between death and decay and liberal policies.
We're seeing murders in our big cities, all Democrat run. All Democrat run.
The American people know this crime wave is not some spontaneous event. It's been fed and fueled in multiple ways by the Democratic Party's far left turn.
Crime is surging across this country. Murder rates are rising, assault rates are rising, carjacking rates are rising. Last year, 12 major American cities broke records, homicide rates. What do those 12 cities have in common? Every single one of them is run by Democrats, all of them.
Hey, listen, while that's an attention-grabbing talking point for the Republican base, a new study shows that Republican-led states actually have a higher murder rate than the ones where the Democrats are in charge. It found that murder rates in the 25 states that Trump carried in 2020 are 40% higher overall than in the states that Biden won. Quote, criminologists say research shows that higher rates of violent crime are found in areas that have low average education levels, high rates of poverty, and relatively modest access to government assistance. So this rise in violent crime is not because the Democrats are in power, but a consequence of policies that gut public education and increase poverty. And that makes guns more accessible and manufacturers less liable. With gun measures stalled in Congress, the White House moved ahead on Monday with what powers it has to curb the violence, as President Biden announced executive actions on ghost guns.
These guns are weapons of choice for many criminals. We're going to do everything we can to deprive them of that choice. And when we find them, put them in jail for a long, long time. Law enforcement is sounding the alarm. Our communities are paying the price, and we're acting today.
But just 2 days after Biden's announcement was made, a gunman shot 13 people in a subway in New York. And later that very same day, Republicans moved in the complete opposite direction, with Georgia Governor Brian Kemp signing a bill on Tuesday that allows people to carry guns without a license or a background check. Joining me now is Fred Guttenberg. His daughter, Jamie, was tragically shot and killed in the 2018 Marjory Stoneman Douglas school shooting. Since then, he has dedicated his life to push for gun safety legislation across the United States. Fred, thank you so much for being here. You know, before we started, I did say to you that I felt like what you're trying to do is to save lives without any concern about political affiliation. Is that accurate?
No, listen. It is. Bullets don't know political party.
Yeah.
Bullets don't know when they hit you if you're a Republican or a Democrat. Gun violence is not a partisan issue. People die in both parties. The responses, the clips you just showed, that was one series of lies after other lies because they refuse to deal with the reality of guns. And I'll just give you an example. When Jamie was killed in 2018, we had about 300 million weapons on the streets of America. Now we're at about 400 million. And that doesn't include ghost guns that we don't know the number on. So when all of those liars stand up there and say those things and discount the fact that it's their policies that led to this huge increase it makes it hard to solve this because they won't be a real part of solving the issue. They've checked out. They're looking for an issue. They're not looking to save lives. And I say, you know what? We have 22. We still have to defeat them.
Well, you know, I saw a statistic that said that law enforcement can only trace only about 1% of those ghost guns. You were in D.C. this past week when President Biden announced his new executive action on ghost guns. But the reality is Biden's a little bit hamstrung in terms of being able to move forward when we don't have congressional action. So what have you been trying to do to be able to push Congress to actually do common sense gun legislation?
Well, first, let me just say this. I could not be more proud of President Biden and his courage to do what he did this week. And the Brooklyn shooting showed just how important it was. They were able to investigate quickly because of a serial number on a gun. What President Biden did the day before will now mandate that on ghost guns. It was a big deal. And so in the absence of the ability to get legislation done, he's going to do everything that he can through executive action and getting a new director for the ATF. But you're 100% right. The reality is we now have a president who will sign gun safety legislation if it makes it to him. We have a House that is currently debating and passing legislation, and we have a Senate that is stuck at a standstill. They're 50-50. But that's closer than we've ever been. This next election matters so deeply to me because with President Biden in place, if we hold the House and get 2 more votes in the Senate, we can get this stuff done. And put those numbers to any number of issues. It's not just the issue of gun violence. We can do more on the environment. We can do more on a woman's right to choose. This is not rocket science. There are people right now. There is a political party right now that has checked out of democracy. They've checked out of governing. They don't care if you get shot. They don't care if I get shot. They don't. They are politicizing. What happened in Georgia the day after the Brooklyn shooting only proves the point. Another state with permitless carry, okay? Let me tell you something. What we learned on the subway in Brooklyn this week is when someone shows up and they have a gun, we don't know their intentions.
Nope.
Which is why we need background checks.
Why we need to make sure that people have licenses to be able to
100%.
To carry guns. So, listen, Fred, you know, how hard does it have to be, though, to have suffered the loss of your beautiful child and to see how this has become a partisan issue, how it's become sound bites that we just heard, talking points for debate, when it's literally the life of a child that could be saved if we actually had that common sense gun legislation that you're talking about?
I wake up every day with my daughter on my shoulder, not by my side, because she lives in a cemetery, but on my shoulder pushing me forward. What is hard is what I live with in my head, which is her final minute of life, running down the hallway, knowing there's an active shooter at her back. What she had was hard. What I have to do is simply the work of pounding doors and calling people out until they do the work of saving lives. Too many of our lives depend on it. And if gun violence hasn't affected you and your family yet, it will. Listen, in the hour that I'm here, there's someone learning they're a victim of gun violence. There's someone burying a victim of gun violence. And there's someone planning a funeral for a victim of gun violence. That's what's happening in America today. It's not normal.
What more needs to be done, though, to galvanize people to actually care, to be able to think that their voice combined with yours and others could actually affect the change that you're seeking right now?
You know, it's a great question. I think people do care. I think there's a disconnect between what's happening in the country and what's happening with a single party in Washington, D.C. And I don't think that single party is reflecting what this country thinks. If you look at polls, 90% of people want background checks. If you go back the last 2 elections, I would make the argument that the 2018 election, which sent the Democrats to power, turned on this issue. And if you look at 2020, President Biden and a Senate that is now under Democratic leadership, I think voters are paying attention, and I think Republicans know it, which is why they are doing everything they can to gerrymander as many states as they can and to mess with the vote. But voters are paying attention. I have a feeling come 22, I know the conventional wisdom right now, the election is 8 months away. I think we're going to be okay, because no matter where I go in this country, and I travel to every state, not just Democratic states, voters are paying attention.
So do you think it's possible then to make these November midterms kind of turn on a single issue vote, which could be just straight out gun control?
Well, first things first, this November midterm is the most important election of our lifetime, even though it's not presidential. Last one, we had to defeat a guy. This one, we have to defeat the entire legacy that he left us with. And this is the most important election of our lifetime. I make the argument that doing something about reducing gun violence and defending democracy go hand in hand.
They have to.
And so I am counting on a voter turnout in this election that mirrors a presidential year. I'm hoping for it. Everywhere I go across the country, I'm encouraging people to make sure they vote and they tune out the noise and vote. If we show up and we vote, we will be okay. But we have to show up and we have to vote.
Well, you know, Fred, part of the theme of today's episode dealt with accountability and the defenders of democracy. And I appreciate everything that you're doing to be an advocate for your daughter, Jamie, for my little girl, and for all the other people that just want to live safe.
How old is your daughter?
She's 7.
She's 7. I do what I do.
I cannot begin to tell you how much I thank you for that. And you're doing it for not only her, the memory of your daughter, but for all other people who just want to live safe and healthy lives. So thank you, Fred, for being here.